If you thought the News Corp scandal was going to ebb away, you are severely mistaken. 2 more resignations and a full, humble and very shaken apology from Murdoch himself. Just what else could happen? This is the program that brings you life, the universe, and other strangeness. And we've had a lot of it just recently. I'm Ian Beaumont. Welcome to Viewpoint. I almost knew when I recorded my Viewpoint Wednesday night I would be coming back to this story before too long. I don't think it'd be just 2 days later on the back of what was basically the big story of the morning. This morning, about 10 o'clock, News International confirmed that their chief executive, former editor of the News of the World, Rebecca Brooks, had resigned. It's a big development. It is another big domino falling in this whole scandal. A scandal that has been compared not gratuitously. In fact, it has been compared by 2 of the people who were involved in the original Watergate scandal from different perspectives. They have compared it to Watergate. You know, one of those was one of the guys who actually reported the story for the Washington Post. The other, who's compared it to Watergate, was President Nixon's White House counsel at the time, John Dean. You know, this could be Murdoch's Watergate. And it's really starting to look like that News Corp, as it exists today, will not exist this way for much longer. There's so much potentially that could happen. James Murdoch is under increased pressure to leave his role at Sky, British Sky Broadcasting. There is intense pressure, growing pressure for the Murdoch family to be separated from News Corp. You know, the fact that even that is being talked about in serious terms is shocking. 2 weeks ago, if you said that News International, News Corp, were in any kind of serious trouble, you'd have been laughed out the building. If you told them that 2 weeks later the News of the World was going to close, the bid to buy B-Sky B would fall apart, and that the chief executive of News International would be gone, so they'll turn around to you and go, yeah, in your dreams, pal. But this is real life. This has happened. And that's not all that's happened. Les Hinton, one of the top executives at News Corp, has quit. Now, he is chief executive of the media group's Dow Jones unit, publisher of the Wall Street Journal. The 67-year-old Les Hinton is the most senior executive in News Corp to exit since it's been engulfed by this phone hacking scandal. He's worked for News Corp for more than half a century after joining Mr. Murdoch's business as a teenage cub reporter with the Adelaide News in Australia. Now, he was head of News International between 1995 and 2007, a period in which the news of the world was hijacking telephones. Hijacking and hacking, I should say. But hijacking definitely, hacking definitely. This is big news. And more than that as well. It is the kind of news that actually gets my juices flowing in ways that I haven't had my juices flowing on news stories for a while. But yeah, the possibilities for what could happen now are endless. Now, News International has a subsidiary that's called News Group Newspapers. That made £86 million worth of profit in the year to June 2010. That's admittedly a tiny fraction of the $2.5 billion News Corp as a whole made in that period. But it just goes to prove the Sun, and formerly the News of the World, were very profitable for Murdoch. Times and Sunday Times, less so. But the possibility of a 7-day Sun has been talked about for a while, yet nothing's happened. Nothing's happened at all. Apart from the buying of the domain name Sun on Sunday, which, to be frank, is possibly no more than a precursor at best. This whole process could, and indeed has, damaged the credibility, the worth of News International. It's damaged it so much that News International's value to News Corp may have already been lost. Many argue the importance of particularly the Times and the Sunday Times, but the entire Murdoch UK newspaper business. It's not as a profit centre, but as a source of influence over public opinion and politics. Some have even accused Sky News of being part of that influence. From this standpoint, definitely News International's value to News Corp is significantly diminished, if not eroded altogether. There is talk that News International as a whole could be put up for sale. But the scandal has actually done damage over pretty much the whole newspaper industry. You know, Northern and Shell, Associated Newspapers, Trinity Mirror, The Guardian, Telegraph. Very few are unaffected in some way, shape or form. The question is anybody willing to pay Murdoch's price for News International? He will not want to sell those newspapers at a loss, but are they really worth what he wants to sell them for? There's also talk over the whole ownership of B-Sky-B. It's a mature cash-generating business now. £917 million of profits in the 12 months to March 2011. Now, best case scenario is that the tycoon might just be able to revive his bid in about a year or two. Probably 2. But in the last couple of weeks, B-Sky-B's share price has plummeted from around 850 pence per share to around 700. It closed today, by the way, up 13.5 pence at 709.50 pence. It's a gain of almost 2%. It had been down below the 700 pence mark yesterday. Now, here's the thing. If the police bring criminal charges against News Corp management in the coming months, and that is still a possibility, nothing's ruled in or out at this point, the regulator Ofcom could legitimately deem the conglomerate no longer to be a fit and proper person to hold a broadcasting license. In short, they could get told, you sell up. You sell your 39% stake. No ifs, buts, or maybes. You sell it. That could be one of the most interesting times upcoming, not just for Sky, but for all of us who watch the media. There's more. News Corp now faces formal scrutiny in the UK at 3 levels. Now, Parliamentary Select Committee, as you know, has summoned Rebecca Brooks, Rupert Murdoch and James Murdoch to give testimony under threat of perjury. All 3 have now agreed to appear. The worst News Corp can expect from the hearing is public humiliation. And that could lead to many other things as well. But now there is a renewed police investigation as well into the phone hacking and alleged payments of police officers, and that may result in criminal charges later in the year, probably around about autumn time, against more employees or former employees of the News of the World. Now, more worryingly, the investigation could spread beyond News of the World to other newspapers in the group. But the biggest challenge to News Corp may come from the public inquiry that was ordered and that will be headed by Lord Justice Leveson. It could result in a major tightening of the rules that govern the behaviour, ownership and regulation of the media in the UK, and that could be all media: television, radio, internet, newspapers, magazines. In particular, the government may legislate to limit a company's share across all media, something that in particular could hurt News Corp. But an even bigger threat could be coming up across the Atlantic. Senior US congressmen from both parties have called for 2 sets of criminal inquiries for the FBI to investigate whether US citizens were victims of phone hacking by the News of the World in breach of wiretap laws. For the Justice Department to decide whether alleged payments to British police could mean that News Corp itself, as a US company, broke anti-corruption laws. Something, if I remember correctly, that was known as the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Now the big question is whether those investigations translate into a threat to News Corp's US broadcast operations like the Fox Television Network, Fox News, Fox Sports Net, and many others. About a third of News Corp's revenues come from US television alone. It's a big, growing, profitable industry for the company. Unlike the US newspapers it owns, the New York Post and the Wall Street Journal, which are generally loss-making. But that's not all. Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard is mulling whether to open her own inquiry into media regulation and ownership. The Australian subsidiary, called News Limited, runs more than 20 papers and websites in the country. They've already opened their own internal investigation, but that could soon be superseded too. In short, there are so many avenues. James Murdoch's position at B-Sky B, as I've said, is looking dicey. Calls are being, led by shareholder advisory group PIRC for him to be replaced as chairman of B-Sky B. Senior management in News Corp and all its subsidiary companies could now find themselves in what I would call a double bind, seen as either culpable for covering the scandal up or incompetent for not tackling it earlier. Almost a no-win scenario. And let's not forget one other issue here. Rupert Murdoch's 80 years old. He won't go on forever. As much as it seems like he pretty much has done, he won't go on forever. There are moves also afoot to curtail the Murdoch family's control over their firm. As I've said before, News Corp shareholders are suing News Corp executives, accusing them of nepotism for overpaying when they bought Shine Group, a British TV production firm, from Rupert Murdoch's own daughter, Elizabeth Murdoch. American investigators have expanded their lawsuit in light of the News of the World scandal to accuse News Corp's board of providing no effective review or oversight and permitting a culture run amok. Stock analysts say that many outside shareholders who collectively own 62% of News Corp, this is way more than the family owns, would like to see power transferred to News Corp's president, Chase Carey. But whether that will actually change anything is another matter entirely. It's a huge situation that continues to expand, grow, and look at it this way. For all the titles, all the newspapers that he owns, there's about 150 of them in Australia alone. The big ones are like the Australian, the Daily Telegraph, the Herald Sun, the Advertiser. The the UK and Europe newspapers, the Times, the Sunday Times and the Sun, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, the Community Newspaper Group, Dow Jones Local Media Group, none of these companies, none of these operations can feel really secure in the current News Corp environment. And even things like B-Sky B, Foxtel, Star TV, Direct TV, Fox News Channel, Fox Business Network, 8 Fox Cable Network channels, 19 Fox International channels, National Geographic International. So few of these companies can feel safe. Very few of these companies can feel very safe at all. You know, the book publishing side accounts for about 1.3 billion in out of 32.7 billion revenue. It's not the big money. You know, the big money is newspapers, films, cable and television. You know, films is like 7.6 billion, newspapers 6.1 billion, cable 7 billion, broadcast TV in the US 4.2 billion, satellite TV around the world 3.8 billion. Compare that with HarperCollins, you know, book publishing about 1.3 billion. It's not the big money spinner. All those operations that are not making huge amounts of money, they are, well, how do I put it? They've got to be looking over their shoulder. They've got to be worried that their future may not be as part of News Corp much longer. In fact, I have to question, I have to seriously question, something I've never had to do before. I have to seriously question whether News Corp as an entity of any kind actually has much of a future left to it. That's Viewpoint. I'm Beaumont. Stay sharp. Stay tuned. Bye for now.